What's going on, guys? Good evening, good evening, good evening. This is Uche and Njoku, and welcome to Family Talk with the Njokus. It is Thursday night, and this is around the time that I think I sound way too loud right now. At least to me, I do. This is around the time that I record our weekly episodes of Family Talk, and I gotta be honest with you guys tonight. I am what am I doing here? I am exhausted. It's been a long week and a long day as well. But nonetheless, I'm grateful to be here. Grateful to be alive. Grateful to be healthy. Grateful for my family, my wife, my kids, for my extended family, my siblings. Unfortunately, again, my sister can't join us today. You know, she's doing her thing, so definitely supporting her and sending her well wishes on getting her business off the ground and getting it stabilized. Um, but nonetheless, I'm here. I'm here, and I've promised myself that this is an important space to be in every week, and I'm going to keep being here. Family Talk is a space that, for those of you who are new, first of all, let me say this: welcome. For those of you who are here for the first time, if do me a favor, if you're here for the first time, subscribe, hit the notification bell, so that uh, whenever I put new content out there, you're aware of it. Um, I don't know, guys. I have to say that tonight, what I want to talk about is really has me a little heavy. Um, so those of you listening, those of you familiar with me, know that I am of African descent. My family's from Nigeria originally. We migrated here in the '80s, and we've been here since then. Um, but nonetheless, we grew up. I grew up in a very traditional Nigerian household. So did my siblings as well. We ate the foods. Our parents spoke to us in the language. It was very clear to us we were Nigerian. That was not a question, and we were also taught what that meant to be Nigerian, but not even Nigerian. But Nigerian is just the name of a landmass that was named um, by colonial, by actually literally by colonial British company, and so beyond being Nigerian, I'm Igbo. That's the tribe that I'm from. That is the people that run the people's blood that runs through my veins, and it means something. It meant something to me growing up, and I believe it means something to my siblings and those of us who are African descent. And it's not just an African thing; it's I think across the board. People tend to have a certain level of pride on regarding where they're from, and it should be that way. It literally should be that way because if you don't know where you're from, then and then how can you know who you are? And some people might feel some way about this because I know there's a tendency. I'm not. I'm repeating what's been said to me. So please, nobody rip my head off. I've had friends of mine who are African American, who say, "Well, we don't know where we're from," and I beg to differ on that. But my thing is, knowing where you're from doesn't necessarily have to be landmass or anything of that nature. Because for me, I know where I'm from because I know I'm in Njoku. I know my father, I know my mother. I'm not as deeply tied in to my extended family, only because of just space and time and everything else. So for me, my Igbo-ness, my Nigerianness goes back to Rashid and Joy and Njoku, my parents, and how they raised me. So we all have roots. Some are deeper than others, some are more shallow, but we all have roots. We all know where we're from, and hopefully within those spaces, we're being raised with certain values. And and it's funny because as an educator in New York City, and I've had the pleasure of having students who are also of African descent, um, and I always find it interesting because whenever an African parent would find out that I was African, or the principal, assistant principal at the time, when I was assistant principal, was African. It didn't matter where it was. It didn't matter I was Nigerian. They could be from Gambia. They could be from Sierra Leone. They could be from from Cote d'Ivoire or Ghana. They were always like, "Oh my God, one of us, which is normal, because at the end of the day, America has a tendency of making people feel they have to belong somewhere. It's not simple as just being American. You have to be American something, African American, Irish American, some kind of American, and certain powers that be determines how American you are. So I understand why when a family finds out that the principal or the assistant principal or the dean or the teacher is from a space relatively close to where they're from, there's a sense of security, there's a sense of safety, a sense of like, okay, my child's going to be good. So, yeah, so just being growing up African is just it. This meant so much, responsibility and how you carried yourself, how you spoke, and everything else. So, and that's something I mean, I'll be honest with you. I hold on to. I hold on to my Igbo-ness. I hold on to my and just the tenets and the principles that my parents raised me with. And I share this freely. My father was a tough guy. He's a not he not was is a tough man, and he raises us raised us all with a iron hand. My mother is and people say my mother's an angel. She literally is an angel. She's an amazing woman, and she always did what she needed to do for her children, and she was a support for us growing up. She's a supporter for us now as adults, you know. But that dichotomy of personalities made at least me and my siblings who we are today. Okay, so I know some of you are like, what is he talking about? Why is he talking about all these different things? Well, yesterday, was it yesterday or 2 days? 2 days ago. Today's the 28th, so I think this was the 26th in Harlem, here in New York City. Um, there was a killing. I mean, it's funny because I don't even know how to understand this because I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around this. So so this is the headline: NYC man kills his mom after she asks him to get a job. Family says. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the story. Um, I think it was the news of the moment here in the city. But I think what makes this story kind of like hit close to home is the fact that the young man, he was 22 years old. So in my book, 22 years old, you're playing man. There are some, you're playing man. Like when I was 22, I was still a kid. I was still trying to figure myself out. I didn't know my head from my toes. Um, but this young man, let me just read to you the beginnings of this article. This is from News New York 4. Um, and it says here, a woman was found dead inside her New York City apartment after allegedly shot by her own son following a conversation about him needing to get a job, according to family members. NYPD confirmed that 22-year-old Musa Kamara fatally shot Fatumata Danson in the head in her 15th floor apartment in Lehman Village houses. Kamara was arrested Tuesday, just half a block from East Harlem crime, just half a block from the East Harlem crime scene, with the murder weapon still in his possession. His family members are now calling for him to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And it goes on, and there's quotes from her from the victim's brother. And it's funny because I'm asking myself, what? I mean, there might never be an answer, but what leads someone to go that far? In this case, they're assuming that there might be some mental illness in the mix of this. Um, but I'm looking at this woman's picture, and if you have a chance to look it up, I could share the image and the video of the newscast, but these days I don't trust YouTube and all these other copyright situations, so I just choose to tell it. So you can go on YouTube and look up the or on Google, actually, just Google NYC 22-year-old man kills mom. But the thing for me that's shocking is the fact that this is an African boy. And if you know anything about African boys, us and our mothers, it's a different level. It's a different level. Um, uh, And if you know anything about African mothers and their sons, and I think even it's I think it's I'm only going to speak about Africanness because that's what I know to my core. I know I know what it feels like to live in that environment. That's the space that I grew up in. It makes no sense to me. The extreme in this situation. The young man took a gun and shot his mother in the head, but she asked him to to leave the house because he was being lazy, whatever the case, he needed to go get a job. But then it makes me wonder about, as an educator, the things I've seen over the past 15 years. And it makes me wonder, where did we go wrong? And this goes beyond African, Caribbean, whatever the case is. Just being an educator in schools. I've worked in New York City schools. I've worked in schools in Las Vegas, and and I've sat in a room and I've seen a, a young black woman, one of my students, tell her mother to shut the f up. I've sat in a room and saw a young black man get up and square up against his father. I mean, like, I've seen these things in my office. I've seen these, I've had to stand in between, and all kinds of stuff. And I'm asking myself, where did we go wrong? At what point in time? And I know this is not the reality in every family, but it's enough where it makes you question, like, what is it that we need to do to find our center again? This young man, Musa Kamara, and it's sad because my son's name is Musa, so it's just kind of like weird, hearing that name, because that's my son's name, and and he's 22 years old. He was raised here in America, and I know this because it says later on in the article that his mother and her family moved here 25 years ago from Gambia and Sierra Leone. And I asked the question, like, what is it that is happening with our young people, regardless of where they're from, where the cultural background and heritage, that's creating this space where violence is the answer. Good evening, Ms. Wins. You said pressure. And I'd like for you to, when you get a chance, to expand on that. What do you mean by pressure? It's, I don't know. I think this is one of those things where I was having a conversation with some colleagues of mine about about the violence that's happening. Here in New York City, there's been a lot of shootings, a lot of a lot of young people, mostly young men, shooting each other. What's going on, Rob? And it's funny because some of the people who I was speaking to are they're of a certain age, and they remember a time when things were bad as well. And they're like, we're talking about 20, 30 years ago, and it's still bad now. The things that was happening then still happening now. And my question is, like, what is the cure for this? What is it that needs to happen to move us away from this space that we're in? Because this space that we're in, we've been in it for such a long time. I look at the young man's picture, Musa's picture, and he looks like any other kid that could have been in my classroom, regardless of where he's from. And I ask myself, between the upbringing in the household and what we try to do in schools as far as produce and educate young people, like, where are we missing the connection? I have my suspicions of what's missing in those spaces, but I'm putting the question out there: what is missing? What are we losing here? So Rob says, becoming a brother's keeper, and that's powerful. That's really powerful because, just the district that I work in, and even New York State, there's a big movement around this program called My Brother's Keeper, which is an amazing program. It was headed by Barack Obama while he was president. He kind of put it into play. A lot of states picked it up, trying to get young men to work together and things of that nature. And I agree with you. It does take a village, being my brother's keeper. But and you said solid foundation. Okay, so we know that these are all things that need to happen. We need to teach or emphasize or reestablish the whole notion of being your brother's keeper or being your sister's keeper. We know that it takes a village, but my question is, where is the village? Who is the village? And it requires a solid foundation. And I believe these three things you just said right now, Rob, you're right. You're extremely right about that. But how do we put that into play right now? Because I'll give an example, and this might not be a big deal to a lot of people, but for me, I always notice this. I could be walking down the street, and I see another black man, and just the act of saying "What's up," like the head nod and everything, is almost non-existent. I mean, once upon a time, there was always this space of like respect. It's non-existent. It's almost like everybody has their guard up. So the whole notion of being a brother's keeper requires community. It requires that the elders are showing the young lions. The lions are showing the young lions how to carry themselves, how to be men. But the problem is, if the men that are in existence, at least not all members, and I know there's a lot of good men out there working, doing what they need to do. But I'm talking about the core foundation of what manhood does look like, or even what womanhood looks like, it's almost absent, or maybe not as strong as it once was. The whole notion of a village. Let's be honest here. Nowadays, you can live in certain neighborhoods and not even know your neighbor. And they can look just like you. Everybody minds their business. Everybody stays in their own spaces. I remember when I was growing up that I could do something wrong 5 miles away, but as I'm walking home, every half a mile, every quarter of a mile, somebody knew what I did. I'm probably gonna get smacked up all the way till I get to the house. And by the time I get to the house, my mom knew what happened, because that was the whole notion of the village. Everybody knows whose child you were. Everybody knew what the expectations were, but there was a communal expectation. You could be reprimanded by the neighbor or by the butcher or whoever the case is, because there was an expectation within the community, which doesn't exist anymore. If anything, we are afraid of our children. If anything, being violent or being a tough guy or being whatever is more respected than being honorable and doing the right thing. Yeah. Rob says we had accountability. And I agree with you on that. We had accountability, and we had accountability to each other. And the sad part about it is my memory of that space is me as a child. Like I remember those times as a child. I don't think I really got to see that as an adult. I don't think I really got to see that as an adult. As an adult, what I've seen is these spaces where you gotta be careful, you gotta move different, you gotta be cautious, because you can get caught up at any given time. So the notion of accountability, of having communal, not even societal rules, but communal rules, where in your community you knew what you do, what was to be done, not to be done. Like all those spaces, it's just now it's just like not it's watered down. And my question is, what is the solution to that? Like, how do we get back on track again? And for me personally, yeah, Rob, you're right. We are afraid of each other. But how do we break that cycle? Because the reality is, I'll be honest with you, I'm afraid for my kids. I talked to my wife about this. I'm afraid for my kids, because my daughter is 2 years old. My son is 11 months old. And the reality is, if I remember a time when the whole notion of it takes a village was real, my brother's keepers was real, you know, having communal accountability was real. And then that was only during my childhood, because as I got older, those things kind of like seemed to not be there anymore. And now we're talking about, as a child, I'm talking about like 30 years ago. And now here I am in my 40s with my kids, and I'm wondering what is it going to be like for them? Like, what is it that they're that I'm raising them to survive through? And I have to say, we have to start by looking at ourselves. There has to be a rise of people in our community who are willing to say no more. No more. There has to be a reconnecting of of um of families, not just the family, but families. Because I believe that there are multiple families, because between race, religion, creeds, whatever the case is. But we need to come back together and say, what do we need to do? What rules do we need to establish in our space to make sure that these things don't continue? Good evening, what's going on, brother? Mental Credit Jams. What's going on? Hopefully you're good and you're being safe out there in the streets. Um, oh, Rob, so you're a social psychologist. Yeah, it is a spiral, diehard spiral downward. But I believe that there's a way for us to get out of this. I really believe so, and I really believe that there needs to be a coming together of minds, and it is happening, but I feel like it's the bourgeois intellectuals talking about these things, while the people who are in the streets in the community are just surviving. Um, one of the things that I've been wondering is, like, this young man, 22 years old. Like, I would like to know, like, who does he hang out with? Who are his mentors? Who was his image of manhood? I can't speak to anything beyond the details in this article. Like, who was his father figure? You know, who were the men in his life who were saying, like, no? Who were the ones who were willing to the way the lion grabs the cub and checks the cub and puts the cub in line? Who were the lions in his life to put him in check? Yeah, because the reality is that wayward movement, that that space where our young people are starting to shift in ways that are starting to scare us, is based on the fact that they were never guided in the right space. And Rob, I do agree with you to a certain extent when you say that, with separation of by class, economic and racial class. But the thing is this: I grew up in a very, I grew up in Los Angeles, and super segregated. LA is amazingly segregated by race. You know, you will find enclaves of racial groups in literally in by city. You go to Inglewood, there's a heavy black side, and there's the heavy, you know Hispanic side. You go to different spaces, and that's how it is. You go to the Valley, all these different spaces. And it's the same thing. It's kind of the same thing in New York City. There are certain groups that tend to mix, but for the most part, we're in these groups. But the problem is this: even within the groups, there are these things that are happening within those spaces. You know, and economic class. You know, I grew up in a space that was like literally we were below the poverty line, but there were still rules to this. There were still rules on how you conducted yourself and what you did. You know. So now, now, uh, I'm about to say, Batman has revealed himself. Mr. Mental Creative James Cornell. So it's an honor. I'm privileged to get to know your name, man. And yeah, keep driving and keep driving safe. And I really respect the fact that you are consistent in coming through and listening to all the different versions of me in these different spaces. So thank you so much. Um, but yeah, Rob, I agree with you. These classes do have an impact, but I still believe within those different spaces, you know, there are things that can be done, you know, to make sure that that we're getting better control of our children out in those spaces. And listen, I can sit here and talk about the problems, and I'm going to give you my solution. And those of you who know me know my solution is always going to be wrapped around education. And when I say education, I'm not talking about what we're teaching kids in the classroom, because those things have been standardized for forever. You know, math, English, all those things, the one, two, threes, the ABCs, those are standardized. My thing is, once upon a time, within our school building, within our community, education was paramount as far as forming what our kids did and how they became. I can tell you, I remember in high school, you know, I went to Inglewood High School. I could tell you the men and women that framed my mental understanding of what manhood looked like and what womanhood looked like. My parents were the first. You know, my father was there, my mother was there, but they're your parents. So after a certain while, you know, you're like, okay, I see what this is, but you need something to, in juxtaposition to what you saw in your household to say, okay, to confirm or invalidate those assertions. And I remember I remember my principal, Dr. Crow. I remember Mr. Searles, my geometry, and then my algebra 2 teacher. I remember Mr. Bailey, Mr. Chidabelu, these men who, the way they moved and the way they spoke to us and the way they demanded that we behaved, the way they demanded that we moved. And we moved accordingly. And I don't see that as much anymore. You know, I don't see that as much anymore. And I'll be honest with you, even in my school settings, I don't see that. I see people who tend to be a little bit more cautious about demanding excellence from students. And I call people out on that, because at the end of the day, our children are only going to rise to the expectations that we have of them. And the other thing too is not enough of black and brown women and men are choosing education as a profession. You know, and that's the other thing too. Like, we need more teachers who've had the experiences that our students that our children have had, who can guide them and say this is a better way, you know, and see me how I am. And I'll tell you, this is one of the reasons I became an educator, you know, because I always felt strongly that I could be a role model, you know. I never thought to myself I was the perfect role model, but I just knew that I saw enough and I was experienced enough in my upbringing that I can be of guidance and support to young people. You know, when I became a teacher, I was a special ed teacher and I taught science. But I can tell you this though, I did what I had to do as a special ed teacher. I did what I had to do as a science teacher. But the most pride that I had as a teacher was those moments that I got to really talk to my students, you know, and hear their stories, and correct their misgivings and their misbehaviors, and not just in the classroom, but being able to say, like, hey, what you do in the streets is not right. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you where this could lead. And a lot of times, those conversations seem as we're going through one ear and going out through another. But there were times that they heard, and I literally saw boys, especially boys, because I mean that's a space that I could connect with very much so. But I also had some girls too who made some decisions to go in the right direction because of conversation we had. I'm not saying here that I did anything amazing. It was just me just sharing myself. But the thing is, the fact that we don't have more people that our students can connect with, you know. I had a young man who came to me. I think I've shared the story before. Who came to me and was like, "Hey, yo, Mr. Njoku, I think this is gonna be my last day at school." And I was like, "Last day of school? What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Nah, man. Like I'm over here wasting time, and I'm not really doing good in school, and you know I'm making money right now, so I don't really need this." So I asked him, "So you making money? So tell me, what you make? What kind of money you making? What are you doing?" And he gave me that smile. So I was like, "Okay." So say no more because I already knew what he was talking about, you know. And he was talking. Then he kind of continued talking about him and his brother. You know, they doing their thing, and he was talking about how that weekend they had made a sizable amount of money, and then he jokingly said, "Mister, I know how much you make, and we made what you make in a month last night." And I was like, okay, all right, you know. And the thing is, this I'm not one that's easily startled or I don't get shook because I grew up in that world. You know, I grew up in a space where you know people hustled and did what they did. So I remember sitting there talking to him. And I was like, okay, and I didn't go into this whole like let me call your mom and everything because I know his family. You know, I know his family and I know their life. You know, I know the life. I know what's going on in those spaces. So I just chose to focus on him in that conversation. I said to him, um, let me ask you a question. So last night, when you were out there, just over the weekend, when you were out there with your brother, you know, do what y'all were doing, how did you feel? And he was like, "Yo, Mister, what do you mean? How did I feel?" I'm like, "Well, how did you feel?" They felt good. We are making money. I'm like, it felt good the whole entire time. So from the moment you left your house to go wherever you guys were, and the whole entire time it felt good. He was like, nah. There was some times where you know things could have gotten real. So I'm like, so there were moments in time that you were concerned for your safety and your brother's safety. He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So then I asked him again. So how many times has that happened over the course of your life that you can count? He's like, man, a lot of times. There's been a lot of times where you know things could have gone left. I'm like, okay. So I asked him. Ask me the last time I felt like you know, like you know things were gonna go left. And he asked me. I was like, there was this one time, and I told him, he asked me, so I told him there was this one time, you know, I pulled into a parking spot, and this dude was like, that's my spot. And we were kind of like going back and forth over the spot. Then I was like, you know, it's not worth it. And I pulled out and found another spot. He laughed at me. He was like, yo, Mr. For real? You going to tell me a story about a parking spot? I'm like, yeah, that's the extent of me feeling that things might go left. And I told him, I'm not trying to get my car key scratched. He looked at me. He was like, "Yo, Mister, I'm talking about real stuff." I'm like, "I am too. The life that I live, the extent of my concern during the day is a parking spot. Whether or not if I argue with this man about this parking spot, take this parking spot, he might key my car. You're worried about somebody can run up on you and take your life because of the game that you're playing right now with your brother and the business that you guys are in." And I'm like, "Is that really worth it?" He looked at me. He was like, "But Mister, that's how things are." I'm like, "Is that what we want us to tell your mom? Is that what you want us to tell your little brother or your sister?" And he looked at me. He was like, "Mister, I'm not even trying to hear that right now." I'm like, "Okay, but listen, you're a smart dude. I've known you since you were in the eighth grade, and at this point, he was a junior or a sophomore. He was a junior. I was like, I've known you for forever. In school years, that's forever. From the eighth grade over to 11th grade, I've known you. Like you know, I'm just going to tell you this. I know you're smarter than this. So I'll see you tomorrow." He was like, "Yo, Mister, I'm not, you're not going to see me tomorrow." I'm like, "I'm going to see you tomorrow." So he left, and I was like, and I'll be honest with you, I prayed it. I prayed. I was like, "Yo, the Lord, just protect this young man, and I hope I see him tomorrow." The next day came, I didn't see him. Another day came, I didn't see him. I called and that the first day he came that he didn't show up. I called his family and mom said, "No, he's fine. He just didn't want to come to school today." I'm like, "Okay, just let him know that you know that we're here." Then a week passed, and I'm thinking to myself, that week passed. So I think I spoke to him on a Tuesday. It was like a Friday. I didn't see him again on Friday, and I was like, okay. So Monday comes, and I'm in front of the school doing my morning welcomes and shaking kids' hands and giving people pounds, whatever the case is. And here I see this kid coming. And I'm like, "Yo, where you been?" He's like, Mister, just do my thing. I was like, "So I thought you said you weren't coming back." He's like, but he had his book bag on. I was like, "I thought you said you weren't coming back." He's like, "Yeah, I said that, but um, you say, Rob, you said you lost the recording. Hopefully you can hear me now. So I saw the kid again. He told me yeah, that after he left, he thought about it, what we talked about, and he didn't come to school because he had to figure out what he wanted to do. He thought he knew what he wanted to do. He needed time to think about what he wanted to do, because depending on what he decided, he was either not going to come back to school, or he was either not going to come back to school and chill with his brother, or he was going to tell his brother, "Yo, I'm good. I'm going to go back to school." So it was between family and school, and he was a junior. This is the beginning of his 11th grade year. And he said, "Mister, you know what? You're right about one thing." I was like, "What?" He's like, I want to know what it feels like to not have to look over my shoulders." Because he already had an older brother who was doing some serious time. He had the oldest brother doing time. Then the brother above him was the one he was chilling with. He had a younger brother. Then he had a younger sister. So, and his father, I believe, I want to say, I don't remember what happened to his father, but I know his father was in the picture. And just in that space of those days, he thought about it and he chose to come back to school. And I was like, okay, cool. I told him like I told all my students, listen, if you ever need to talk, I'm here, but I know you can do this. And he finished junior year, he graduated. And last time I saw him this past summer. Unfortunately at a funeral, one of his classmates and one of my former students had passed away. And guess what he's doing? He works in education, which is funny because he actually works for a community-based organization that runs after-school programs. And it's funny because here's a kid who was thinking about leaving school for the drug life, and since that time, he's literally not left school. Because after he graduated, he did the college thing. I don't think he didn't graduate, but he did the college thing. But he kept on working in schools. His part-time, his jobs and part-time work he ever did was always in the school, whether as a school class, either as a teacher's aide or a school aide or whatever the case is. And it's funny because, again, I didn't perform any kind of miracles. Listen, I just did what I do, and I like to talk to my students. I like to know where they're at. But sometimes I wonder if more students had people in their lives that had those conversations with them, because by no means am I a square. I mean, I love my square life. I love having a square life, but I've seen some stuff, and those are the things that help me shift towards where I'm at right now. Joshua, what's going on, brother? He's one of my former students, high school student now, doing his thing. But that's the thing, and I think it's very important that our students have, whether in the school building or in the community, men and women who are willing to stand in the gap and be guides and be guides and be wisdom bearers for them. I wonder if this young man and it's funny because I don't want to. It feels weird saying I hope it's a mental issue that he had that led him to kill his mother. But regardless of what it is, I believe something could have been done. Something could have been done to stand to I don't know, to prevent this from happening. Somebody could have seen this kid needed help, But he's also a barometer, a thermometer of how things have gotten bad in our communities as far as just our young people and what they go through and what they're being turned into. So Joshua, how you doing, man? How's COVID-19 treating you and the pandemic and all that? Hopefully you're doing well in school and handling your business. I know, and yeah, it's been a long time since we last spoke. And it's funny because this young man Joshua, It's funny because Joshua, I want to show you something real quick. Hold on, people. Remember this? So this is my little Incredible Hulk figurine. This young man right here, Joshua, actually gave it to me. I think he was in the seventh grade, and he knew I was a big fan of Incredible Hulk, and he was like one day it just showed up and was like here, and I was like, oh snap, So he says, I appreciate you speaking on something like this, regardless of what it is. Something could have stopped this, although being problematic. Although being a problematic topic from a social standpoint, we could definitely clear situations like this, and I agree with that. I totally agree with that. Like I just like again, I would say, yeah, I would say people just we need to talk to our young people, to our young men and women. We need to talk. We need to create spaces for them to speak and not judge them and let them get stuff out their chest, understand what's going on, because there's so much trauma happening in our community, and there's so much that we're not privy to because we're not listening. Um, but again, I'll say this: we need more people who are willing to say, "Yeah, I'm going to become a teacher. I'm going to become a police officer. I'm going to become a social worker and work our community and be there and peel back the layers and figure out what's going on, and maybe some of these things could be prevented. Not even maybe. A lot of these things will be prevented. It's just that we're in the wilderness. That's what it feels like. We're in the wilderness and we're just trying to survive. And but I don't know about you guys. This is not good enough anymore. It's just not good enough. It's just not. Um, I love what I do. Listen, I love my community. I love like this. I love having an impact on the lives of young people. You know, and Joshua could tell you. Listen, Joshua. I would say this with all love, was a knucklehead, like knucklehead. You know, but the thing was this. One thing I appreciated about him was that when I pulled him to the side and said, "Hey, talk to me. What's going on?" He would talk. He would talk and he would speak. And I was like, "Okay, so now how do we support you? How do we help you?" And I always told him every time, all the time, like, "Man, this is like you are brilliant. You are capable. You will get this done." And he lived up to it. And I'll tell you this, he inspired me because the reality is my students inspire me because when I see them do what they do and they're successful at it, despite of all the things that they're going through, then I know that I gotta keep doing what I do, you know, because listen, in my years, in my 15 years in education, I've seen it all. I have seen it all. I've seen kids who came to school with shoes that were two sizes too small. I've seen kids who were dealing with such trauma at home that nobody knew about. I mean, I've had kids who just who come out and tell me like, yo, I've eaten 2 or 3 days, like all these kind of crazy things. And I'm just like, okay, how do we address these things? Because as a society, once upon a time, things like this didn't happen. As a community, things like this didn't happen. Go back to the 60s and 70s, the Black Panther Party, and those entities like that in the community that said, listen, we got to make sure that every child, every family is good. That's what you call community. And that's something that that now more than ever we need to make sure that we're addressing and we're pinpointing and we're working towards reestablishing. Um, Man, I'll be honest with you guys. I'm hurt by this article, man. Like honestly, it's just weird to me. It's really really weird to me. A son killing his own mother. It's really weird to me. But we got work to do. We have a lot of work to do, and we got to keep pushing the work and keep doing what we need to do. Let me see here. Joshua says, I'm a bit perplexed on why it's difficult for some people to speak on problems that arise, such as what happened. Yeah, But you know what it is? I'm perplexed too, but I also understand it's not glamorous. It's not glamorous. It's not, and then the other thing too, it's just. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes it just feels like okay, it's just another bunch of minorities or black people who are dead. It's not a big deal, you know. But these are the things that is it's like a disease in our community that we need to resolve. And the reality is this. Like I said this yesterday. We keep waiting for Superman. Superman is not coming, so we have to fix this. We have to fix this. We have to be mentors. We have to step in. We have to make decisions and choices that that positively impacts our communities. We need to stop trying to run away from our community, but just literally find ways to make things better. You know, um, thank you, Rob. You said I hear your heart. Yeah, it's a heavy heart, brother. It's a heavy heart. Joshua says, "Look, every time I fell down that cliff, you always caught me. Yo, you easy to catch, but you a little bit of a lightweight. You're a skinny dude. Uh, Not much. Let me see. Let me put this back up here. It says, not much higher than I was before. I've kept my promise to you and to give what I have to others. The knowledge that I've learned from others. I'm in the process of finishing high school, and after I'm joining the Marine Corps. Oh, what? You didn't tell me this, bro. You joined the Marine Corps. You say you framed the picture of you and I from graduation. Yeah, I'm honored. I'm honored. Um, listen, I'm not one of those people. Anyone who's listening, I'm not one of those people who says, "Oh, the military is an evil place." The military. Listen, the Marine Corps shaped me. That space, the time I spent in that space, helped me see the world very, very clearly. So it's not for everyone, but anyone who's willing to take up the challenge. One thing I appreciate about the Marine Corps is that as a man you're respected in that space. And some people might not agree with me, but I felt that way. I felt like in that space, you know, I was framed. I was framed in manhood. And I feel like I wish that some of that energy was in our community as far as how we raise our children to make sure that they understand who they are. You know, you meet a Marine, they'll tell you, once a Marine, always a Marine. You know, and that's based on that high standard of identity, that collective understanding of who you are. So, listen, hopefully you're doing your running, hopefully you're doing your push-ups, you get your pull-ups in. When I did my first PFT, I knocked out 20 pull-ups. So I hope you're in that bracket, Joshua. So, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help you, man. When you get a chance, just drop me a message on if you go to Facebook, you just type in my name, look me up, and DM me, and so we can exchange information, so I can keep an eye on you, man. And you know the deal, man. Much respect, much love. Well, everyone, I don't know if I even presented a proper solution or if there is a solution, but I just wanted to get this off my chest and just engage in dialogue. And I appreciate all of you for entertaining my thoughts and contributing to this conversation. Thank you again, everyone. And in closing, I just have to say this: we have to stand both feet on the ground, as women and men in our community, and start to call each other out. So we need to start calling each other out and start making moves to improve the state of our community for our children. You know, I'm tired of hearing about all these deaths and murders and killings, and they're being perpetrated by our kids. It's not right. It's not right. Um, but I have faith. I have faith that a brighter day is coming. It's going to come based on the work that we do. So, with that being said, thank you so much for this time, this moment, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Join me on Saturday at 10 o'clock for the Sneaker Principal podcast, and I promise it will be a little bit more lively than this evening. And that's pretty much it. Peace, y'all. Joshua, have a good night. Joshua, get to bed. It's past your bedtime, bro. All right, y'all. Be good.